It began at 9:14 a.m. somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. A passenger sitting by the window filmed a sunrise glowing across the horizon. Waves shimmered below, engines hummed above, and everything looked painfully normal until the recording captured something no one noticed at that moment. The sound of the ocean faded, halfway through its roar. Not lowered, not interrupted, just erased, like someone had deleted the audio track of the world. Minutes later, similar posts appeared from cities across Europe. A man in Lisbon filmed seagulls by the shore. Their wings flapped, beaks opened, waves crashed behind them. But the video had no sound. Not muted, not corrupted, just empty. By the time people realized the truth, the phenomenon was already spreading too fast to explain. In Delhi, a street vendor sounded his cart's metal bell, but instead of a sharp chime, the bell swung silently as if trapped inside a vacuum. In Johannesburg, construction workers hammered steel beams. Sparks shot out, metal bent, cables snapped, yet the entire site moved in total silence. Even stranger, the silence wasn't constant. It came in waves, like invisible ripples washing across the planet. One district would suddenly go mute, birds flying with no wing sound, trees shaking with no rustle. And then 5 minutes later, noise returned, only to vanish again somewhere else. The first global alert described it as an acoustic dissolution event. But the name didn't ease anyone's fear. In the emergency broadcast, a UN communicator tapped her microphone to test it. The taps were visible, her fingers hit the metal, but the world heard nothing. Then the entire feed went silent, while the video continued. For the first time in history, mankind watched a global emergency briefing without a single sound. Scientists tried to trace the waves. They mapped them across continents. They followed the silence as it crawled across oceans, cities, deserts, and forests. What they discovered was even more disturbing. The silent waves were not random. They followed a pattern, a giant looping spiral that wrapped around Earth like an invisible script. And at the center of that spiral sat the Atlantic Ocean, the same place where the first silent footage appeared. Authorities deployed deep-sea microphones, hydrophones designed to detect the faintest underwater signals. But when they lowered them into the water, they recorded only one thing: a single tone, a low, steady hum, so faint it was almost inaudible. So constant it felt deliberate. Then at exactly 12 p.m. UTC, the hum suddenly stopped, and the world heard nothing for the last time. The silence locked into place in a permanent, global, total, and humanity realized something horrifying. Silence was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of something else, something vast, something intelligent, something that had finally begun to speak. For the first 6 hours after the Great Silence, humanity stumbled through a world that felt unfinished, like reality had loaded halfway. People clapped but heard nothing. Car horns flashed but didn't resonate. Thunderstorms raged above Brazil, lightning splitting the sky, but the world received only light. No roar, no rumble, no echo. But the silence wasn't the strangest part. Objects that should have produced sound began behaving differently. In a lab in Norway, a researcher dropped a glass beaker onto the floor. The beaker shattered into 1,000 pieces, but the fragments didn't scatter naturally. They fell in a perfect radial pattern, as if guided by an invisible symmetry. In Canada, a drummer hit his snare in frustration. The drumhead vibrated violently, far more than physics allowed, yet still produced no sound. It was as if the idea of sound still existed, but the mechanism had been hijacked. Then came the resonance anomaly. High-speed cameras around the world captured something the human eye had missed. Every vibrating object, be it guitar strings, car engines, or human vocal cords, was vibrating at the same frequency. Exactly 61.3 Hz uniform. Global impossible. Sound hadn't disappeared, it had been rewritten. Across the scientific community, theories burst like sparks in the dark. A quantum field collapse, a solar harmonic event, a shockwave from a distant supernova arriving at Earth. But one group saw something the others missed. A research team in Kenya, analyzing tectonic data, discovered faint tremors deep beneath the Atlantic, identical in timing to the silence waves. These tremors weren't random, they were precise, purposeful, timed like communication. Meanwhile, in cities worldwide, a new phenomenon appeared: shadow vibrations. People began noticing small objects, spoons, pencils, keys, rattling minutely on their own. Not from movement, not from tremors, but from some unseen force nudging them into coordinated micromotions. As silence took over the planet, these vibrations grew synchronized. Someone posted a video from Italy. A room full of wine glasses trembling in perfect unison, forming patterns as if responding to a conductor the world could not see. Then came the moment that shook governments into panic. At 3:22 p.m. UTC, for exactly 1 second, the silence broke. Not with noise, but with something else. Every electronic device on Earth, every phone, radio, speaker, airport PA system, emitted the same tone, the same frequency. 61.3 hertz. A low humming whisper, a single syllable, a single message, not in any human language, not even sound as we understand it. It was more like a signature, a stamp, a declaration of presence. And then, just as quickly, the silence reclaimed the planet. Humanity realized the truth. Something wasn't removing sound. It was preparing the world to hear something new. For the next 2 hours after the global 61.3 hertz signature, governments issued their first quiet orders. Do not speak. Do not shout. Do not attempt to force sound. Because something alarming had begun happening to people who tried. At a market in Jakarta, a man frustrated with the silence screamed with all his strength. His mouth opened, his throat strained. His vocal cords vibrated, but instead of producing sound, his voice rippled outward like invisible waves distorting the air around him. The ripples shimmered like heat mirages and then vanished. Doctors everywhere made the same observation. Human vocal cords were still vibrating, but the air around them was refusing to respond. It was the air itself that had changed. Across the world, scientists ran synchronized tests and reached the same impossible conclusion. Earth's atmosphere was behaving like a muted instrument, physically intact, mathematically valid, but deliberately restrained. Then an even stranger discovery surfaced. A researcher in India compared pre-event satellite imagery with current atmospheric scans. The layers of Earth's atmosphere, troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, had shifted by a few millimeters each, not randomly symmetrically, almost like someone had tuned the planet. Meanwhile, at exactly the same moment across 7 countries, thousands of people reported an identical sensation, a pressure inside their skulls. Not painful, but intentional, like someone knocking gently from the inside. Social media, though silent in audio, was exploding visually. Videos from Dubai, New York, and Rio showed a phenomenon now called the airwave pattern. When people exhaled in cold weather, their breath didn't drift normally. Instead, the vapor curled into swirling geometries, identical everywhere on Earth. Shapes that resembled spirals, glyphs, symbols. A language made of breath. Patterns humanity had never seen, but which felt unnervingly familiar. Then scientists found something chilling. Those swirling breath patterns matched diagrams found in ancient ruins, Sumerian, Olmec, and Göbekli Tepe, all depicting what archaeologists once called sky signs. Signs thought to represent gods or cosmic cycles. They weren't symbols. They were frequencies. Frequencies identical to the 61.3 hertz signature now wrapped around the Earth. As panic simmered, a new global anomaly emerged. Animals began acting in perfect synchrony. Birds perched in identical lines, all facing the same direction. Whales changed their migration routes in unison. Dogs sat still, staring at the sky, ears twitching to a sound humans could not hear. The world had gone silent, but nature was listening. At 6:14 p.m. UTC, the second atmospheric tone struck. This time not a hum, but a pattern, a rhythm. Boom, 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 boom. A heartbeat, not human, not biological. A cosmic pulse reverberating through every electronic device on Earth. The message was unmistakable. The silence was no accident. It was preparation. Something was signaling its arrival. Something vast, something close. The cosmic heartbeat continued for 11 minutes. Every boom vibrated through buildings, through water, through the bones of every living creature. Yet not a single leaf moved. Not a single flag fluttered. The world was trembling, but the wind remained dead. And then, all at once, the heartbeat stopped. For 3 full seconds, the Earth felt hollow, still, expectant. Then the sky changed, not visually but mathematically. Satellites detected that the atmosphere was vanishing for a fraction of a second at perfectly timed intervals, disappearing and reappearing every 0.00224 seconds, like a frame flickering in a cosmic film. Scientists had only one way to describe it: The sky is buffering. Those who viewed the raw satellite footage felt something primal shift inside them. It looked as though the planet was phasing between two realities, caught in the middle of a transition it didn't understand. Then came the shadows. Across major cities, people pointed upward in horror. There were shapes moving high in the atmosphere. Not aircraft, not birds, not drones, but shadows without sources. Silhouettes of massive geometric structures drifting behind the sky, like something enormous was pressing against the outer layer of Earth's atmosphere from the outside. Triangles, not cylinders. Arcs, forms too perfect to be natural, too quiet to be machines. And all of them were moving with the rhythm of the cosmic heartbeat that had just stopped. As the world watched, phones and screens began displaying spontaneous patterns, swirling fractals, glitching symbols, and unfamiliar language signatures. All devices, all brands, all at once a universal override. In Cairo, a man recorded his smartwatch flashing symbols identical to those that appeared in ancient desert carvings. In Scotland, an entire line of street lamps began blinking in synchronized patterns, the exact pulse timing of the cosmic heartbeat. This wasn't random. Earth was being calibrated. At 7:03 p.m. UTC, every shadow behind the sky froze. A dense silence fell again. And then, the anomaly scientists feared most began. The atmosphere started descending. Not rushing, not collapsing, drifting downward in a slow, controlled compression like a lid gently closing. Pressure rose. Birds dropped from the sky. People clutched their heads as the air thickened, heavy and intentional. The reason was now obvious. Earth's atmosphere was being reshaped. Not destroyed, not erased, reformatted. Suddenly, lights across multiple continents flickered and died, not due to power failure, but because the air itself had changed its optical properties. A global blackout. In the darkness, people saw something that should have been impossible. The stars were moving. Not twinkling, not drifting, moving. Sliding across the sky in synchronized sequences like pieces of a rearranged cosmic puzzle. And then the stars formed a pattern. One shape, one message. A single geometry glowing above the silent world. A circle split by a single line of light. The oldest symbol in human history. The one found etched in stones across civilizations that never met. A symbol we never understood. Until now, something was opening, and Earth was being prepared to receive it. The ancient symbol hung in the sky, a circle split by a single vertical line. It pulsed once, soft, silent, like a breath from something far older than stars. Then the world changed again. The line bisecting the circle began to stretch, expanding upward and downward until it wasn't a line at all, but a tear. A thin rupture running through the night sky like a crack in glass. Light poured through it, but not the light of any star. This was colder, straighter, intentional. A light that cast no shadows. A light that made darkness glow. And as the tear widened, the air around it vibrated with a frequency that bypassed ears and crashed straight into the mind. People collapsed, clutching their heads. Not in pain and in recognition. Because the frequency wasn't random, it was a word. Not in English, not in Arabic, not in any spoken tongue. It was older, primordial. A word every human brain was somehow built to understand. Ready. The tear widened further, and the shadows from Part 4, the geometric shapes drifting behind the atmosphere, now pushed through. Not machines, not living creatures, not ship structures. Massive city-sized architectures passing through the tear like blueprints unraveling in real time. Perfect geometric forms, spirals, hexagonal towers, floating rings, interlocking lattices. They didn't fly. They didn't hover. They anchored themselves along an invisible grid around Earth. A grid suddenly visible, glowing faintly across the sky like lines of an enormous cosmic circuit. Earth was inside something, a design, a construct, and then humanity finally understood the stars' rearrangement. The constellations had shifted not to send a message, but to form a clock. A countdown, and it had reached 0. The air pressure stabilized. The atmosphere locked into its new shape. The stars froze in their new positions. The tear in the sky stopped widening. Now stretching from horizon to horizon, a colossal vertical gateway splitting the heavens. The frequency returned, clearer, stronger, this time forming a second word, begin. At that moment, every ocean surface stilled, flat as polished black stone. Every volcano went silent, every seismic plate stopped shifting. The earth paused, waiting. The structures above rotated in perfect unison. aligning themselves into a configuration that scientists later compared to the interior of a microprocessor. And then humans saw it. Descending through the vertical tear, slowly, majestically, was a sphere. The same sphere carved into the oldest stones of Sumer, Egypt, Mohenjo-Daro, Göbekli Tepe. The same sphere at the center of prehistoric cave symbols, the sphere that every civilization drew, without ever contacting another. A sphere cracked open with a single line, the symbol in the sky, now real, now here. The sphere descended until it hovered just above the atmosphere, pulsing softly with the rhythm of the cosmic heartbeat that started it all. And when it pulsed a final time, the frequency delivered the last message humanity would hear that night. This is not the end. This is the restoration. The world held its breath. The sphere opened, fade to black,